Chapter 1. Begin all acts and thinking by using Kuluwm the All. Tablet 5. The Journey of Nibiru. 19 times 7 equals 133. Lo, the planet Tiamat was a site used for excavating different metals, elements and minerals such as plutonium, chlorine, chlorophyll, ammonia, gold, platinum and silver, as well as scanning the ocean floors for other elements that were beneficial to these beings in other planets. In the depths of the ocean of this planet Earth are some of the most valuable resources for human life, such as food such as kelp, different types of fish and energy sources such as iodine. In these waters are an abundance of dissolved gases such as nitrogen, carbon dioxide and oxygen. Other substances are nitrates, phosphates, which are needed by plants for photosynthesis. Silicon dioxide is necessary in the building of skeletal materials in some marine organisms. Remaining elements that are essential to marine life include iron, manganese, cobalt and copper. Several mineral resources lie on the ocean floor and in solution above it, such as salt, magnesium and bromine. Seawater contains all the dissolved substances necessary for the growth of plant and animal life. Other beings know of these resources, and thus they have made many visits, taking what they have excavated back to their homes, and they continue to make visits on the planet and even live under the seas. Tiamat was also used as a hunting ground and resort. Beings would intergalactically travel from planet to planet, doing what was called planetary shopping. Some of the planets in this galaxy were most frequently visited because life existed there in various forms, such as Illyuwn, meaning deity of war, now called Mars, Kishar, meaning foremost of the firmaments, now called Jupiter, including many others in Orion, meaning skies or heaven, six-star constellation, Kama, meaning to be wealthy, which is the Pleiades constellation, having 7 stars, and Aish, to lend aid to help, also known as the Plowman, Octorus, as well as Clarion, meaning clear, just to name a few. The boundless universes are filled with all kinds of life forms that come from all types of origin, and your planet Earth held the most abundant of life sources, which is why all kinds of beings visited frequently. Now let me continue. On one of these routes to the planet Earth, the planet craft Nibiru, meaning planet of the crossing, also called Murdoch, was making a routine trip, which was then on an orbit that took 1024 years, short of an equinox of each Earth time, which was 25,920 year orbit called an AMS by the Anunnaki. This craft being 4 times the size of the planet Tiamat, whose diameter was 15,852 before the splitting, which was cut in 2 equal halves, and Nibiru's diameter being 63,408. The ship Nibiru came in search of other planets that were rich in natural resources and minerals to take back to the planet Rizq to protect it from the damaging ultraviolet rays. And what would make you understand what ultraviolet rays are? Ultraviolet, or relating to the range of invisible radiation, wavelengths from about 4 nanometers on to the border of X-ray region to about 380 nanometers just beyond the violet in the visible spectrum. We're looking at the word ultra, meaning beyond, from the Latin ultra, from ultra meaning beyond, and the word violet, meaning the hue of the short wave end of the visible spectrum, invoked in the human observer by radiant energy, with wavelengths of approximately 380 to 420 nanometers. Any group of colors reddish-blue in hue that may vary in the lightness and saturation, from the Middle English, from Old French, violetta, diminutive of viol, from Latin viola. As for red, the hue of the long wave end of the visible spectrum, it has evoked in the human observer by radiant energy with wavelengths of approximately 630 to 750 nanometers. Any of the group of colors that may vary in lightness and saturation and whose hue resembles that of the life liquid called blood, one of the additive or light primaries, from the Middle English, from Old English reed. And as for the color blue, the hue of that proportion of visible spectrum lying between green, which is yellow and blue, and indigo, which is blue and violet, and is evoked in the human observer by radiant energy with wavelengths of approximately 450 to 490 nanometers. Any of the group of colors that may vary in lightness and saturation, one of the additive or light primaries from Middle English blue, from Old French bleu, of Germanic origin. As for the word ray, it's a thin line or narrow beam of light or other radiant energy, radiance light. On the prism it appears as purple, ranging from violet to red. And now, with an understanding of ultraviolet rays, you must be able to grasp the damage that it was doing on Rizq and is doing here on Earth. The danger is the destruction of the ozone. As it happened there, it is also happening here. What is ozone? A blue gaseous allotrope of oxygen, O3, formed naturally from diatomic oxygen by electric discharge or exposure to ultraviolet radiation. It is unstable, powerfully bleaching, poisonous oxidizing agent with a pungent, irritating odor, used to deodorize air, purify water, treat industrial wastes, and as a bleach. Fresh, pure air, from German ozon, from Greek ozon, neuter present past particle ozine, meaning to smell. So in order for the Rizqians to protect their planet, they sought out gold. The gold of this planet is good. This great planet-sized ship Nibiru came nearer to your solar system, traveling at the speed of light, 186,272 miles per second. Yet it is found to be exactly 186,282.396 miles per second, or 299,792.458 kilometers per second. It came from Illyuwn, the 19th galaxy, a tri-solar system having 3 suns, also called the Great Galaxy, known as the place on high, called Heaven or Jannah, on a journey through the stars that took 25,920 years. A year is also called an arm by the Sumerians, who were taught by the Anunnaki. This great ship Nibiru, as it was later known, was a mothership, and Nibiru at the time held 12 smaller cylinder ships called shams that were to be launched out from it when Nibiru reached its destination. Nibiru was equipped with 4 separate atmospheres, and what would make you understand what 4 atmospheres are? They are: 1. Outside of the spheres, where there is no air and there is no atmosphere, Nibiru is able to adjust to that environment. 2. When you come into this dome-like planet, where there is oxygen and air, Nibiru is capable of adjusting to that environment. 3. When you go into the Antarctica, you would have to take your crafts into the glaciers. Nibiru is capable of adjusting to that environment. 4. When you'd have to take your craft beneath the sea, Nibiru is also capable of adjusting to that environment. That is the 4 separate atmospheres that all the crafts titled Nibiru, as part of a Nibiru fleet, is capable of adjusting to. That is, they are capable of adjusting to all atmospheres of changes, such as tar, earth, Mu, water, Nefu, air, and Set, fire. The command to activate this is simply Tamu Nefu Set. Nibiru on all of its crafts were also equipped with 4 separate magnetic fields, which is a person, a place, and an object, or a situation that exerts attraction. 1. Nibiru is capable of being magnetized or attracted by a magnet, meaning 2. To operate by means of magnetism, such as a magnetic recorder. 3. To relate to the magnetic poles of the Earth, such as a magnetic compass bearing. 4. Have an unusual power or ability to attract, a gravity form of magnetism, from the whirling vortex of each planet at 30 degrees and its magnetic attractions, creating a magnetic grid, the flow of electricity when an object comes in contact with the pulling or attracting powers, and the magnetic attraction by appearance, emotion, or desire. The Grand Mothership Nibiru can hold many thousands of crown-shaped ships, but this mission only had 2,880 crown-shaped shams. It also had a fleet of 24 crystal cities with crystal-like domes, giving them the ability to break down light as a prism would, and be able to make use of the energy. It has solar panels that's the size of a pin's head, or less than that, and can generate millions and millions of megawatts of energy as well. As Nibiru passed by various suns or stations set up in the galaxy, Nibiru drew an energy charge from them. Nibiru was set up for holographic interdimensional transport. That is, it was capable of cloning itself holographically to appear in more than one place at the same time, making it virtually impossible to determine which is the holographic projection from the original. Nibiru is capable of traveling distance from point to point or through space and time interdimensionally. It can go through time, future or past, without interfering with the principle of now or then, and it is manned by 144,000 crew members headed by 24 elite beings called Yahwehans, 12 Yah agreeable and 12 Way disagreeable that stood 7 feet tall. However, on this flight the craft Nibiru had to first pass by the planet Ea, which means he whose house is water, and is now called Neptune, as it did many times before. The planet Ea Neptune is a twin to the planet Anu Uranus. By twin planet I mean that Neptune is very similar and in some aspects identical to the planet Uranus. The planet Uranus was originally called Kakab Shanama, the planet which is the double. Uranus is also influenced by the gravity of Neptune. The gases that made up the atmospheres of Neptune and Uranus are exactly the same. The sizes of Neptune and Uranus are similar. Their colors are identical and their rotational times are similar, Uranus being 17 hours in Earth's time and Neptune's being 16.5 hours. The planet Uranus practically rotates laying down, so the size, if looked at from the wrong angle, can surely be mistaken. Uranus tilts at the extreme angle of 98 degrees. You could almost say that the planet lies on its side as it travels around the Sun. This means that the north and south polar regions of Uranus experience alternate periods of day and shadow hour, and summer and winter, each of which is up to 42 Earth years long. The temperature of this planet Uranus on the side that is hidden from the Sun is the same as on the side that is facing the Sun. As Nibiru came nearer to Neptune, its gravitational pull caused electrical storms on the planet on that Friday afternoon at 1300 hours of Earth time, some 24 billion years ago of Earth time, and caused Nibiru to go slightly off its orbit. As the craft Nibiru passed by Ea Neptune, the planet Anu Uranus came from behind the planet Neptune, and it caused the appearance of a bulge, and that bulge pulled on Nibiru's orbit and caused the great ship Nibiru to begin to wobble in its orbit from fear of crashing. This happened because the planet Uranus was not originally seen in the solar system when Nibiru made its first visits. Uranus moving from behind Neptune caused Nibiru to veer in its own original path in order not to hit Uranus, and made it collide into another planet called Maldek, also called Vulcan. The original name for the planet Vulcan is Maldek. Maldek was between Lahmu Mars and Kishar Jupiter. Maldek was 27,500 miles in diameter. Maldek had a population of billions living under the seas in the sub-cities of Kana, which was occupied by the Maldekians, and Veda, which was occupied by the Troglodytes. Maldek also had 2 moons. This was the planet of Masmukia, or Troglodytes, dragons and Voltex. The Troglodytes' average height is 3.5 to 4.5 feet, and their heads are extremely large. These were the slaves. However, the rulers of the Maldekians are very large in size, from 7 to 9 feet in height, scales of multiple colors in which they are shed like all other reptilians. They also lay eggs for reproduction. The Troglodytes have 2 round eyes without pupils and no ears or protruding noses, just 2 small holes in the nose area. Their mouths are slits without lips. The Troglodytes are hairless and have no teeth. The Troglodytes' hands have 4 webbed fingers and no thumbs. The Troglodytes live totally underwater in great cities with many great biologists. Because they live underwater, if the planet sped up, it wouldn't affect them, because gravity is different underwater, meaning gravity is the force that the Earth exerts on an object. The force of gravity is relatively constant all over the surface of the Earth, except for in a few places like the equator, and varies slightly at different altitudes. Many people think, for instance, if a steel ball was dropped from a building and a cotton ball, that the steel ball would fall a lot faster, when the cotton ball only lags slightly behind. So the force was still constant. Water is denser than air, so objects move slower through the water than air. The impact of the crash affected the beings on the surface of the planet of Maldek, and not underneath the water, because the water is more dense and would slow down the object. So the impact would be less damaging, and the shock of the impact would be less severe. However, it was daylight, so most of the beings had come on land. All of the beings that could have negotiated were were dead due to the crash. The only beings that survived were the ones under the seas, which were the military and the warriors, who were looking for a chance to fight anyway. Nibiru had no way of contacting the beings on the planet Maldek to let them know that it was an accident and not a deliberate attack. Telepathic communications were forbidden to prevent interference by other telepathic, disagreeable beings. This was because the Maldekians were not part of the Interplanetary Confederation. Their Starfleet of warriors were a group of reptilians who bore the symbol of a reptile, who called themselves the Ninga, meaning warrior, launched an attack. Thinking that the planet Maldek had been attacked, 4 fighter ships of the Ninga fleet launched out, and it went off its orbit into the universe and attacked with the intentions of destroying Nibiru. These 4 ships, equipped with high explosives created of plutonium from Maldek's Starfleet called Ninga, managed to escape Maldek as Nibiru passed by and followed in Nibiru's path. Nibiru put up its 4 magnetic force fields, which were created by Anu and given to Murdoch, and destabilized the 4 attacking ships. Nibiru created the magnetic cube called the Kaaba. These 4 great ships called the Ninga fleet moved on as 4 powerful winds that were trapped by Nibiru's force field and unable to break loose. Maldek is now referred to as the Lost Planet. The 4 fighter ships of the Ninga fleet are called the North Wind, South Wind, East Wind and West Wind. These 4 fighter ships that originally surrounded Nibiru and appeared to launch an attack were now trapped. The great ship Nibiru activated its 4 magnetic force fields, incapacitating the ships. All of their controls and equipment ceased to function. A force field was put up, and they were trapped in the environment of Nibiru. Its new wobbly satellites were caught in Nibiru's gravitational pull and began to circle, making 4 whirlwinds. Nibiru immediately launched 2 ships to return to Illyuwn to inform the elders of the incident, in case of the need for assistance. Nibiru proceeded to move counterclockwise from the planets in the solar system. Nibiru pulled in towards Anshar, which means foremost of the heavens, now called Saturn, and its force fields kissed off the planet, and its gravitational pull caused Nibiru to veer off its own orbit. The 3 satellites were added to Nibiru's force field called the Evil Wind, Whirlwind and Matchless Wind. The orbit of Nibiru was originally on a 25,920-year orbit called an alms. It shifted into a new orbit of 3,600 years called a Shah. Its orbit was caught in this solar system, always to return. Then Nibiru bounced off the planet Rum Titan, which now surrounds Anshar Saturn, and sped up its motion, creating the Saturn's rings, referred to as the Necklace of Saturn. At this point, Gaga Pluto was released from its natural orbit around the Sun and was pulled into the direction of Lahamu Mars and Lahamu Venus. The path of Nibiru was now bent even more towards the center of the solar system, directly towards Tiamat, which means Maiden of Life, now called Earth. As it moved into your solar system, Nibiru caused problems amongst the other planets in the solar system by pulling their moons. Nibiru, making one complete spin, threw the winds off into space. The approach of Nibiru began to disturb Tiamat, and it alarmed the beings of Tiamat that something was entering their atmosphere, causing volcanic eruptions, storms, hurricanes and floods. Tiamat was forced to launch 11 ships headed directly for this bright gleaming, or what appeared to be a planet entering its airspace. It was Nibiru. The Starfleet of 11 ships from Tiamat was led by Kingu, the Great Emissary, which was once ruled by the Maldekian deity Luna. The great ship Nibiru had 7 warships accompanying her, and they were launched at the 11 ships that were launched from Tiamat. Kingu was the name of the head defense force of Tiamat, and it later became the name of the imperfect planet, now called a moon, one of many moons which was originally accompanying the planet of Tiamat before the crash of the satellites of Nibiru. The 11 ships which were launched from Tiamat and Nibiru were immediately detected by the force field of Nibiru and eliminated. One of the 4 satellites that came with Nibiru from Maldek, called the North Wind, was lined directly for Tiamat. The impact of the North Wind caused Tiamat to split into 2 parts because of the high explosives that the ship contained called plutonium. The hole which the North Wind brought into Tiamat caused the upper part of Tiamat to wallop in its orbit, setting large portions of it on fire. The North Wind then came back around, shattering the half into pieces, making comets, of which Halley's Comet is one, and asteroids. Comet coming from the Greek word cometus, long-haired star, from comb, hair, The length of time a comet takes to complete its orbit is known as its period. Some comets have periods of less than 7 years. Comets are considered a part of the solar system since they never leave the limits of the same system. The comet's tail always points away from the sun due to the pressure of the sun's light on the dust particles, and it's usually 5,000 miles in length. The comets are often caught by a planet's gravitational pull, which causes them to shift from their course. Many of the pieces of the comet that caught on fire form the asteroid belt that is in the center of this solar system. The East Wind, another tremendous ship from Maldek, coming with Nibiru from Maldek, swung around and put a hole straight through the upper half of the planet. The planet Tiamat had turbulence and was unstable, while other planets nearby were still wobbling in their orbits. Tiamat was pulled in many directions, on one side by the two larger planets Lahmu, now called Mars, and Kishar, foremost of the firmaments, Jupiter, on one side, and the other two smaller planets Lahamu, Venus, and Mumu, one who was born, Mercury, on its other side, all pulling and tugging. Nibiru's 7 ships broke off into 2 separate fleets, and first 4 circling the planet Tiamat, which is now called Ki, creating a net-like web, which was a magnetic field. One of the 3 warships from the second part of the fleet of 7 from Nibiru, located on the outskirts of the force fields, then launched a bright flame of light, much like ball lightning. The ball lightning was filled with brilliance, and it pierced straight down into Tiamat, completely neutralizing Tiamat's electric and magnetic force fields. A portion of this massive ball of light, which was launched by one of the 3 warships from Nibiru, was called the West Wind, and also known as the Evil Wind, tore straight down as a ball lightning into the center exploded and gouged out a large hollow space into the center of Tiamat. And the West Wind became a tremendous 600-mile diameter sun called Sol, and was trapped in place there, with a sunscreen to direct the heat waves through the North Pole, away from the planet, creating the Northern Lights, or what is called the Aurora Borealis, which are solar flares or sun flares. This ball of light, now in the center of Tiamat, was named Apsu, meaning one who exists from the beginning, and the place was named Eshera. 3 satellites launched off of Nibiru, creating a tetrahedron 4-sided force field of energy at a 19.5-degree angle around the new half of Tiamat, with a hole through it, and a smaller sun, Sol, also called Apsu, was placed inside Tiamat's center. Now, this newly formed planet called Tiamat, also Ki, New Earth, was trapped in its orbit, where no planet had been orbiting before, protected by forces by the guidance of these ships while she healed herself. The 600-mile diameter sun called Sol, Apsu, traveled through the great hole called the Abyss for a distance of 3,963 miles to the center of the half of the planet Tiamat, which the west wind bore a hole through, called Ki, now called Earth from the word Eridu. So, it was indeed one of the satellites of Nibiru called Winds from Maldek that crashed into Tiamat and not Nibiru itself. The Voltex troglodyte that manned the ships that crashed survived and thrived in the seas of this new planet called Ki, or Gaia, or even Gi, once called Tiamat, which much later became known as Earth from Eridu, starting the new restoration or reconstruction of life on Earth, including evolutionary process of plant and animal life. Now the last of the winds, the south winds, crashed into Ki and created the Grand Canyon, and gave birth to another small planet in its own orbit, and rotated around this newly formed planet Ki, which became the moon that you see today, creating a lunar orbit called a Sheshki, meaning celestial deity who protects Earth, Ki, and called Kingu, which had become the chief amongst them, ruled by Luna, which Murdoch Nibiru made shrink as a Dagai, mass of lifeless clay, and thrown into outer space to wobble in its own orbit. Deprived of its orbital momentum, Kingu was reduced to the status of a mere satellite, a moon, today known as a Keres, which is today known as the largest of the minor planets and or asteroids. The upper half of the planet Tiamat, which became oval-shaped after the moon had broken away, was now 7,926 miles in diameter and 24,896 miles in circumference, and it was set for replenishing or restoration on the part of the great Starfleet responsible for its damage. The newly formed planet Ki was trapped in its orbit, protected by the forces sent from the guidance of the 4 ships that were part of the 11 of the fleet from Nibiru, of which 2 returned back to Illyuwn to inform them of what had happened. Now this new planet had 2 suns, one in its belly, 3,963 miles from its surface, creating an inner tropical environment, and the other sun, Shamash, which was 93 million miles away from Ki's surface. Ki was now trapped in its new orbit around the outer sun, Shamash, to create a year of 365 days. Thus a new time zone was created for this new planet. The south wind crashing into Tiamat also created a black dust cloud to cut off Earth from the sun. Now you have 2 sets of planets separated by this asteroid belt, creating inner planets and outer planets. The inner planets were Munu Mercury, Lahamu Venus, Ki Earth, Sheshki Moon, Lahmu Mars, and the outer planets were Kishar Jupiter, Anshar Saturn, whose planet is Rum Titan, Anu Uranus, Ea Neptune, and now Uzmi Pluto, previously called Gaga, separated by this asteroid belt, and the remains of the lost planet Maldek. So one half of the original Tiamat is an asteroid belt, and the other half is presently your planet called Ki, Earth.